السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Today, inshallah, we're going to be covering a lesson on Tazkiyah, and it is chapter 4 from the War Within Our Hearts book that I had suggested before. And it's called, this chapter is basically about the effects of media. It's quite an interesting read. I think it's just as beneficial it is for teens and the younger audience. I think it's just as beneficial for adults and parents to read this and to try to understand what's happening, in the social media and in on TV and these movies and all these different things that are so accessible to our children. So today, inshallah, this lesson, inshallah, I'd like to cover the social and cultural influences that TV and internet channels and YouTube and TikTok and all these different things that are available, that they have. Recognize the various effects of watching improper things. We'll be discussing some different aspects of that, and then we're not going to be able to do the group discussion right now, but this is another thing that we're going to take notes on these verses that I'd like you to do individually, from Surah An-Nur, from I believe it's Surah Mutaffifin and some other surahs, that these are quoted from. So inshallah, please, we'll discuss those inshallah while we're going through this. And in the book, it was mentioned something really interesting. It said it is a sociological truth that the environment plays a large role in shaping an individual. And this is something that it's just so apparent. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said it very simply. He says, "Al mar'u ma'a man ahab," that the person will be with the one he loves, right? And in another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that the person, you know, um, is on the deen of his Khalil, the one he's really, really close to. And so there's no doubt about it that the environment that we're in, that we live in, it plays a huge or very large role on the shaping of the individual. If the society is going towards atheism, then that's, unfortunately, what many kids will end up, the ideology that they'll follow. If a lot of the teens and the pop culture and so on are doing zina, then that's what kids are going to be doing, because that's the society that they're in. And one of the imams from New York, Imam Siraj Wahaj, I think I might have mentioned this quote of his before, but he said that someone came to him for, his son was, really messed up, right? And so he was really being he was very annoyed by him, what he was doing and so on. And then so Imam Siraj, he asked him some more details, and he said, tell me a little bit, where did you send him to school, what type of tarbiyah did you guys do at home? And so the father and mother, they just pretty much said, we just put him in public school, and he's been there from kindergarten all the way till 12th grade. And so Imam Siraj, he said, well, what am I supposed to do now that these kids are eight, or this child is, or this man is 18 years old now? And it's too late, really, right? You put them in a garbage dump for 18 years, or 13 years, and then you expect them not to smell, and that's not possible. And so we have to make sure that we keep that in mind, the environment that we have our children in, and what type of, the surroundings, and the types of friends that they have. So you might have heard this quote before. It's called "Image is everything," right? It's like a tagline that, what was that? The soft drink, I think, Sprite. So they came up with this, and it really tells us kind of the mindset of these advertisers, and how they're getting into the head of the people, of the youth especially, and creating this type of identity. And so today's youth, they're flooded with various pop culture images and trends within society, right? There's so many things that are happening. I'm going to share some quotes, inshallah, and statistics later. But everywhere they look, there's different references. There's images. There's like dirty things. There's emails. There's whatever you want to call it. It's out there, and our youth are being bombarded with these things, and those things definitely have an impact, in the long term of the individual. And so over here we have the Muslim identity versus mainstream, right? Mainstream media, mainstream school, everything that's happening around their society or their culture. um their culture is being shaped by that. Their identity is being shaped by that. And most kids, they have a very fragile identity, right? So when they're in school, they have certain peer pressures that they're facing, and people they looked up to and so on, especially when they're teenagers. Then when they're at home, they have a different type of environment and role models, and people to the parents are telling them maybe very different things. Um, and so because of this you know another identity type of develops, and this is something that becomes really, really dangerous, because our kids, when where we expose them to all these movies and TV shows and all these different social media platforms, these celebrities and famous people that are out there, they become their role models, right? And because of that, if they don't know any better, and most kids don't, and parents really aren't not really watching them, um, those people become the ones that they look up to, and every single thing that they do throughout their those teenage years, and maybe even into as young adults, they're following those celebrities, and that's why their identity is shaped around those. And we have to be careful what types of things and images and items that they're watching. Sure why that's not working. Let's see. Okay. And so we have this over here, this you know a question, a discussion, and I'd like you to put it in the chat box, that how many devices, not TVs, okay? Actually, when the book was written, it mentioned, about TV, but TV is like the thing of or a thing of the past, right? So now it's everyone has a device in their hand, and so how many devices do you have in your home? Right? And I'm just thinking to myself, we have probably like 4 or 5 laptops. We have one or two desktops. We have like almost every person in the house except my youngest daughter has a phone. So there's like 15, 20 devices that we have, right? And as a parent, how am I supposed to observe my child at all times when they could be under the blanket, and looking at things, or watching a movie, or watching whatever? And these things are, and that's why we have to be careful of how accessible we're making it for our children, especially at the younger age. When I was teaching at an Islamic school, when I was the some of the young kids, like fourth, not even fourth grade, it was like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they would have iPads, and they're watching like movies all the way to school, on the way back from school, and so on. And then they're at their brains always like kind of functioning in this way that they have to be stimulated. And so this is why we have to be careful what types or how many devices especially that we have. And then the other thing, as I mentioned before, like these role models and celebrities, why do they become extremely wealthy? Because it's really more about the advertisements, all right? All the advertisement dollars that are put behind it. And so there's, when they're sitting in front of the TV, or they're sitting in front of a device, it's a way for them to kind of just, relax, wind, right? Wind back. And so when we're relaxing in that state, right? This is the best time for advertisements to hit us, right? So a lot of people are being brainwashed, right, while they think they're relaxing. There's a huge amount of influence. Otherwise, people wouldn't be paying millions of dollars for ads. And it's it was mentioned that it's the drug of the masses, right? It's like it helps people escape from reality that's around them. So just like drugs do. So they just want to turn on the TV and sit back. I have a neighbor when I go walking at night, not a few doors down actually from us. Um, every single night there's something going on, some type of either NBA game, NFL game, they're having some kind of party and barbecuing or doing something like that, right? So this is where the masses kind of just sit there and they try to escape from reality. And there's if you kind of do some studies on how the radio started and how TV started and so on, it was more of information, right? It was an audio, like especially when it was just radio, people would just listen in and they would be listening to these news pretty much, and maybe different types of information or informative shows. And then slowly, when TV started, that's when it became visual, and they realized how powerful of a tool it was. And so they started changing it from information to just ads. And now we're just bombarded with so many things that's always constantly, in our mind, or they're trying to get whatever they can from us, right? If you go on Facebook, there's tons and tons of different ads that come up. Then there's, if you're on Twitter or whatever the kids are doing nowadays, there's so many different ads. And this was an old study, right? This is from 2008. The Americans, they average 35 hours a week on TV, right? So imagine someone's working 40 hours a week, okay, 8 hours a day, and then about 7 hours a day, or maybe 6 hours on average, right, throughout the week, that they're or 5 hours, right? So they're spending 5 hours on TV every single day, okay, and then 42 ads on average are being kind of portrayed to get people stuck to watching that. Same thing with YouTube. Same thing with all these different channels that our kids are doing, and we might be saying, well, we don't have TV, or we don't watch TV anymore. Well, it doesn't. You don't have to have TV now. They know better. They're attacking us in different ways, right? And so this is something that we have to watch for, because these people, again, are not just popular for any reason. They become popular, and then they get paid millions and millions of dollars because of their influence, the influence that they have, right? So I was just looking it up. The Super Bowl that's coming up in, I think, about 2 weeks. They said that the each ad, 30-second ad, is now $6.5 million. Okay, $6.5 million. And so, because of the popularity of people like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and even though he's dead, he's still like popular, right? And people, they'll bring up different ads or something about him. Um, and Eminem, and all these Khabib. Khabib is actually, mashallah, a really really good role model to for our children. But um, all these people who are extremely popular, one of the reasons they get paid so much, again, is because of that popularity and the influence that they have. And so they want to take advantage of that, and try to do whatever they can to influence ourselves and our generation. Because don't think that we're not privy to this influence. It's just as our kids are being influenced, we're being influenced to buy, right? And so be like Mike. That was the big thing. I remember when I was 11 or 12. Michael Jordan was in the playoffs. He actually won the first championship that year. Excuse me. And my brothers and I, it was summertime. It was extremely hot because Michael Jordan was bald, because I mean, he didn't choose to be bald, right? But he was bald, and so we shaved our heads. We asked our dad to shave our head. We bought his Air Jordans, right? That were $70-$80 at that time, in 80, like 91. And so all these different things to be like Mike, right? And uh, uh, the more you learn about the person, then you start seeing other things that they're doing, because this might be kind of like really innocent in a sense, but when you start following them in, like, because he was I don't know if he went to jail for it, but he was really into gambling, right? He was into a lot of other things as well. And then they get divorced, and then other types of things that they do, and then they'll say themselves, oh, we're not role models for your children, but they are, right? And so this is something that we have to be very cognizant of, that what are we doing when we're following these type of people. The other thing is, the more we follow these celebrities and these types of people, the less we're following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in most cases, right? And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is our greatest role model, and so we have to be, we should be trying to follow him, As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, right? And indeed, in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like the greatest, or the most beautiful example. And so we should be following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that's not cool, right? That's not what's hip nowadays in school. And so a lot of people, we start following these trends and what's happening without really realizing uh, how how much trouble we could be getting ourselves into in the long run. Okay, the next thing over here. Okay, so desensitization. You might have heard this before about like boiling the frog. There's an experiment, and so there was, there's a pan or like a pot, and the researchers, they put a frog in it, and it was hot water, and the frog jumped right out. Okay, and then the other test was that there was a pot of water, and they slowly boiled the water, and the frog was inside of it, and it didn't know any better. It just kept getting used to what was happening with the temperature of the water, and it eventually died because it boiled, right? It was boiling hot. And so this experiment shows that desensitization that happens over like a long term has a really bad effect, because right when you see something bad, especially when they're a child, they might like feel something bad right away, or want to get out of it, not see it, turn it off. But the more you see that, the more you get used to it, then it gets really difficult to put those things away, right? So, for example, when I was growing up, like PG-13, for example, or rated R, rated R was like really bad stuff, right? There's a lot of nudity, bad words, violence, like like extreme amounts. Now, those things that were rated R previously, now they're probably PG-13, right? And so and or maybe even less than that, right? Just PG. And so it's just becoming more and more common to see nudity and sexual references on TV, right? In movies, bad words, left and right. Just I don't remember what I was watching, but I think it was a PG-13 show, and they said the F word, which is it was known to be something rated R before, right? Violence too. So all these violent scenes and killing, murders, and such, and all these types of things are becoming so prevalent that it becomes very, very difficult for us to realize that what we're doing or what we're watching is actually going to hurt us. And so even in ads, this is becoming more and more common, which we have to watch out for. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah An-Nur, ayah number 30 and 31, that to say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and then also to the women, right? To say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. And they should not display their ornaments except their beauty, pretty much, except what appears of them. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us the importance of this, that guarding our modesty, our eyes when we're watching these things. And I watch movies, I watch shows sometimes, but it's something that I have to remind myself and all of us that we have to be a lot more careful, because a lot of these shows have these things, these scenes that we take very, very lightly, and we don't think of it as a big deal. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and guard us from our eyes when we're watching that. And so the eyes, the corruption that it could cause, and that's it's very obvious why they put such pretty actor or handsome actors and pretty actresses on TV, because they know that's going to engage people and keep them glued even more. And so they do that, right? And the eyes, they have an influence on the heart, right? It's like a I can't think of the word right now, but it's pretty much like it shows us what's in the heart. All right. So if a person keeps watching these types of nasty types of things, it's going to eventually corrupt their heart. And so we have to be very, very careful of what's happening. And in the back in the chapter, there's a few examples that were mentioned, which I really I liked and I wanted to share. Which one was the input that we have. Sometimes we've been on the wrong site. We're trying to download something or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden there's a virus on our computer, right? And so it's extremely difficult to get rid of it because it's corrupted now, right? The hard drive is corrupted. and so you have to wipe everything clean in order to be able to use this laptop or a computer anymore. And in the same way that if a person keeps watching dirty things, keeps listening to bad things, they are eventually going to hurt their heart in a way that they are going to start, that virus is going to take over, and their heart is going to be covered. And I'll talk about that on those two ayat in a minute, how the heart gets hardened and it gets sealed actually. And so our bodies, and soul cannot reach the potential that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put for us because we're watching these types of things, right? And like there was another example in the book that I liked, which was the SIM card, that when we plug in the SIM card's not working, your phone's not going to work. Or you might be able to go to Wi-Fi or other things, but just say like you can't really use it for what it's supposed to be used for, or the potential it's for, because the SIM card's missing. And so if we corrupted the SIM card or our heart, then through our eyes, then we're going to, it's going to affect us very, very negatively. So the example of that, about the blackened heart, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep our hearts purified and always in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Mutaffifin, ayah number 14, He mentions, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ, that a person, but rather, their hearts, there's a rana on there, there's a rust on it, okay, from what they used to do, and so what they used to earn or what they used to do. And so this, because of this, their hearts became rusted and covered in that sense. And then in another verse, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. So in another verse in Surah Al-Baqarah on ayah number 7, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a seal over their hearts. So I want you to think of this example that, the cars, they have a certain a tint on them, right? Some cars. And so the window, if the more tinted it is, the less light that gets through. And so there's a point that comes that, if it's so much heavy tint that there's almost no light or very little light coming through, and it just it makes everything, it doesn't let that light penetrate the car or inside. And in the same way, if our heart is rusted, if it's sealed, if it's blackened, that light of guidance, right? The Nur al-Huda, the Quran, the Sunnah, the reminders, all these things will not benefit that blackened heart because it's too dark already. And so we have to watch what are those things that, are going to darken the heart. And one of them obviously is watching and listening to things that are not appropriate. And so we have to be careful of that. And there's another chapter, inshallah, that covers that as well. So how do we polish our heart? And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told the companions, the Sahaba, that the heart rusts like iron. And the means of polishing this rust is by reading the Quran and remembering death. So these two things are the way to, soften that hard heart, right? And these are just two of the ways. And so we read and we try to memorize the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. We go to the janazas, right? We go to the graveyard and remind ourselves that is one day we're going to end up there. So all of these things, this takes the hardness of the heart away, or that rust away from the heart. The other example that we could think of when it comes to this is the new car versus the old car, right? You have, when someone buys a brand new car, right? They get the keys. They're excited, of course, about the car, but they're extremely careful. They're looking around and making sure there's no dents, there's no scratches. They're very careful about the way they keep their car, all of those things, okay? But if you have like an old car that you bought and it was already dented and scratched up and everything, one more scratch or dent is not going to hurt you. Spilling some soda in the back seat or something like that, it doesn't matter too much because it's an old car, right? And you don't have that much of an attachment to that. So in this sense, this hearts are kind of the same way, that when a person is righteous, that small sin that they do, they feel so guilty about it. It catches them. They feel bad, and they want to make tawbah, and they want to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they want to see what are some things happening in their life that is causing them not to, be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's kind of like, you could say, the new heart or the new car, right? And then you have the old car, the old heart, the one that sinned a lot, that now the extra sin, that person missed Fajr this morning, they didn't read Quran, they didn't, do anything what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to do as a Muslim. One more sin is not going to make a difference, right? It's not going to hurt them much. And so this is why it's extremely important for us to make tawbah when we have done something wrong. And so this next slide over here, and we're almost done, inshallah. The effects of sin. And so this is, the effects of sin are extremely great. Like, so a lot of times we'll do something, and then it will cause us to, for example, miss Fajr the next morning, right? Or if someone is in the habit of doing tahajjud, they'll miss tahajjud. And those scholars in the past, they used to be so afraid. They're like, maybe if they missed tahajjud or something, or did some little, they didn't do something that they usually did, like reading Quran or whatever it would be, or they had a weakened memory, like Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, when he had a weaker memory and he couldn't remember things as he used to. He went and complained to his teacher, and then they found out that he had basically looked at the heel of a woman. I mean, compared to what we look at and see every single day, subhanallah, right? So each glance, makes that hunger grow. And then when that hunger grows, then shaitan comes and tries to, find us ways or give us ways to satisfy that hunger, right? And that grows as well. And so a person goes more and more into sin because of each glance or each sin that they're doing. And so, I mentioned this example already. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us have tawfiq to make tawbah to him, and to come closer to him as much as possible. And so this, next slide, a lot of times also, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier too, when I was talking about the attractive people, that we have, these things that people are watching. A lot of times these are not, it's not reality, right? So these images that are being stored in our head as that this is handsomeness, or this is what a pretty girl looks like, all those things. A lot of times those people have went through many, many surgeries, right? They're photoshopped images. You could look it up one time. It's called the Dove commercial, and it's like the normal looking girl, and the way they make her portray her and take the pictures and then put her up on the billboard. So it's a false sense of reality, and that's what we're looking to as handsomeness or beauty, right? And so when someone doesn't have those certain traits, then they feel bad about themselves, right? I don't look like that. So we have to make sure that we have that in mind, that a lot of those people, they're they're fake, right? It's not real. And so there's the other thing that comes with watching too much TV, and usually in a show that's 30 minutes or an hour, or maybe even a movie 2 hours long, like there's marital problems, there's all these different things, and then they're fighting and all sorts of different issues happening, and then all of a sudden they're fine, right? And that is not reality, right? It doesn't, things, relationships are not mended like that. And so this is another thing that a lot of people, they fall into this trap, thinking that, well, I'll just get out of the situation really quick, just like how it happens on TV, and that's not reality. And so they start feeling really negative about themselves after these types of situations. So there's a few books I'm going to recommend, inshallah. One, Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Jerry Mander. This book, it's very interesting. It's talking about how the information that's being fed to us through TV is controlled by an elite group. It's like a small group of individuals who are kind of telling everyone what to think or what to do. And so we have to be really mindful of that. Do we want to be brainwashed by a certain group, a small group of people who are probably doing it for their own benefit in some way or another, right? Or maybe even for Dajjal, who knows, right? And so this is something that we have to equip ourselves as parents to learn about these things. The other thing over here the book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. So in this author, he talks more about, this this issue of how we are just so enamored and always just watching TV and trying to amuse ourselves that we think that every single thing should be entertainment. So our lectures in the masjid should be entertaining. Our, activities at school should be entertaining. Otherwise, I'm just going to zone out. I'm not going to listen. All right. So this is something that we have to be very, very careful of, because the passive state, like I mentioned this earlier as well, that when someone is just kind of sitting there and think that, I'm just laying back and relaxing, watching TV, in this inactive state, there's images and dialogue and all these things that are being kind of put into our subconscious, and these are going to eventually be adopted by us. And because we don't really do that self-reflection before it comes into our mind, because we're in that passive state when we're watching it. The other thing over here, like I mentioned already too, and manufacturing consent, that you have a small group of people, again, they're kind of pushing people in a certain direction. I was just reading a book called The Tipping Point, and it mentioned this about how, people are so influenced by little things that are very, they're not, unless you, I think one of the examples you mentioned is that you have to slow down it to 45 frames per second, like very slow motion, to see some of those things that are happening, and how that influential that is. So this is that moral compass that, if a person doesn't know, you know any better, and is not studying Quran, not studying what they're supposed to be, they're only watching TV and media and so on, their moral compass gets, whacked, right, as well, because they start doing things that are contrary to Islam, and they're just following that small minority of people. So what are some solutions that we could do, inshallah? And the discussion, I'll leave it up. You could pause the video for that later, but some solutions, and inshallah I'll end with that because I have another class in a few minutes. But we need to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We need to ask him for protection. If we're already, a'udhu billah, uh, seeing, watching things and addicted to something that we shouldn't be, then we need to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us get out of that, right? And he protects our gaze. And recite his beautiful names, Al-Muhaymin, right? The protector, so that he may protect you from watching these things that are bad for us. Al-Bar, the righteous, right? So when asking, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Al-Bar, that he is the one who can help us become righteous. And so we beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that way. We limit the amount of TV we watch, movies, and how much time we spend on our devices. Most phones, smartphones, come with that. Like, it tells you how many hours you watched today, or you were on your phone today. So making sure that we're going, fewer hours, not more, every day or every week, and keeping a monitor for ourselves. Reading or playing sports, going outside, riding a bike, running, doing other things instead of being in front of the screen, exchanging. Oh, sorry. The next one was the when watching TV, making sure that we have family members and we're not alone, right? Because a lot of times shaitan comes and tempts us when we're alone. And so watching TV and media and social media with other people, because of course we're not going to watch something, bad if our mom is sitting right next to us, or, our son or daughter, or someone is right next to us. And so watching things with other family members will help us, prevent us from watching something that we shouldn't be. And lastly, and this is the biggest one for parents, I think, that don't have a TV or computer or some, devices in the room itself, right, in the bedroom. Just keep it away. You could all put your phones like on the counter or something like that in the kitchen, before you go to sleep. And in this way, you'll be able to control this, what's being watched, what's being shown, with the different family members. The discussion over here, these are different questions. I don't have them right now, that I can't share them with you, but if you could pause the video and just take a note of these are some really good questions that parents can ask, their kids, inshallah, and have a discussion about this, about these different questions, and the things that we're watching. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and understanding, and let us inshallah implement, what I said, And jazakumullah khairan for listening. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.